This season has been unlike any other season in NBA history. From the reduced crowd sizes, to the lack of playtime for multiple players, to the crazy trades and trade scenarios, this season is unlike any season we've ever seen. But even with how different this year has been, there's still one thing that remains the same. LeBron James is still at the top of the MVP race. This has been beaten to death, and it's the millionth time you guys are hearing it, but I mean, the guy is 36 years old in his 18th season. Like, it's to the point where I literally cannot ever imagine seeing LeBron have a bad season. But even with how great LeBron has been this season, there are still a few other guys that people feel have a better case than him for MVP. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about who I think are the top 5 in the MVP race and all of their cases for winning MVP. So let's get into the video. So real quick before we begin, only a small percentage of you guys that watch my videos are actually subscribed, so if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, it really helps me out a lot. So this MVP race has been different from what a lot of people were probably expecting. As of right now, the current MVP ladder is the exact same as my personal top 5 MVP candidates. In no particular order, my top 5 is currently LeBron James, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Damian Lillard, and Joel Embiid. And it's really interesting because although we're just under halfway through the season, you can easily make a case for any one of those guys winning it. Let's start with the man himself, LeBron James, because it seems like no matter what, he's just gonna be this good until the day he retires. LeBron has been his usual self, averaging 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists while shooting 37% from 3, which is tied for his second best season average. He's doing this with Anthony Davis recently being in and out of the lineup, and with the news that he would be out until at least the All-Star break, this could be his chance to really start running away with it. Because I did say in an earlier video that I didn't think he was the MVP because even though Anthony Davis hadn't been playing like his usual self, he was still there. But now, with the absence of another all-star caliber player alongside him, he really has a chance to put himself above everyone else. But I still understand if you still feel like any of the other guys have a chance to win it because of the depth that the Lakers still have. Because the reason that LeBron's assists have been down from last season is the fact that they have another playmaker alongside him in Dennis Schroeder. And so if you still feel like depth will play a factor, I have nothing against that. Let's move on though, because we still have 4 other guys to talk about. So let's move on to the guy that a lot of people would have either right behind LeBron James or ahead of him, Joel Embiid. Now, he's been a pretty interesting case because although he does have Ben Simmons on his team, the Sixers have been probably the hardest team hit by health and safety protocols other than the Wizards, of course, and yet they still find themselves at first in the Eastern Conference led by Joel Embiid, who's averaging nearly 30 points and 11 rebounds to go along with 39.7% from 3, almost 40%, and 54% from the field overall for a true shooting percentage of 66%. But I also say that it's one of the most interesting cases because of his injury history, because he's never played more than 64 games in a season, but he's been great with that so far, as a majority of the games that he's missed this season have been due to health and safety protocols rather than actual injuries. But Joel Embiid recently has had a great supporting cast, with Ben Simmons averaging 15, 8, and 8, while being arguably the best defender in the league, and Steph Curry, who's shooting 50% overall and 48% from 3. So he has had a decent amount of help, but of course he's still the X factor of that team, which is the best in the Eastern Conference, which could also be attributed to the addition of Doc Rivers, which has been a welcome change in their locker room. And speaking of locker room, that's also the name of an app that I think you guys would be really interested in. The Locker Room app is a relatively new app centered around public discussions about any sport of your choosing. You can either host rooms or join into any room. A number of other NBA creators are also hosting rooms on this app, such as Dom2K, Rusty Buckets, B-Sols, and Legend of Winning.
Oh shit, that's me!
And even NBA rookie Tyrese Halliburton, who I was actually lucky enough to have a conversation with and ask him various questions about his rookie year. But if you are shy or nervous, you don't need to be on stage with everyone else who's actually talking. There's also a text chat that everyone can see, and you can still listen in as long as you're in the room. But I encourage you to give it a try. And by the way, this is not paid, I just really like this app. And you can download it with the link in the description and the pinned comment. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's move on to perhaps the most underrated candidate of the year, and that is Damian Lillard. Dame is pretty quietly having the best season of his career, and I say quietly because not as many people were talking about him being an MVP candidate until relatively recently, but it is deserved because not only did the Blazers find themselves at the 4th seed in the West led by Dame, who's averaging 30 points and shooting 38.5% from 3 on 11 attempts, but he's also doing this without CJ McCollum by his side, who's been sidelined for the last 15 games with a foot injury. And even then, in those 15 games, Portland has put up a record of 10-5, including an ongoing 6-game win streak, during which Damian Lillard has been averaging over 32 points a game, and recently had a win against the Pelicans, where he put up 43 points and 16 assists, and hit multiple clutch shots down the stretch. Speaking of which, Dame time is in full effect this season. With the NBA's definition of clutch, which is the final 5 minutes in a 5-point game, Dame has played 15 such games, and the Blazers have a 12-3 record in those games, and he's shooting 63% overall and 58% on threes. That's insane, bro. And so it makes sense to have him in the conversation given all those factors. But let's move on to Nikola Jokic, because he's also had an interesting season. He's been averaging 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists, but as of the time of recording this, the Nuggets still find themselves at 7th in the Western Conference, struggling to stay above 500. And a part of that may be the departure of Jeremy Grant, because he was such a huge defender for them, and another factor has been Jamal Murray's subpar play so far this season. This is Double D from the future, of course. Right when I say that, Jamal Murray drops 50, but carry on, I guess. But as long as they have Jokic, I feel like they could be in a position for him to have a chance at winning. But that team is still a bit of a question mark almost halfway through the season. So now, last but certainly not least, we have Steph Curry, who's putting together arguably the best season of his entire career stats-wise, which is unbelievable to say considering he won unanimous MVP and is now 5 years older than he was then. The numbers wouldn't suggest that. He's averaging 30 points on nearly 50-40-90 again. He's shooting 49-42-93, and this has the Warriors bouncing between 7th and 8th in the West with a record of 16-14, which may not sound like a great record, but when you consider the fact that Golden State is without their second best player, have had one of the toughest schedules in the NBA up until this point, have had 0 centers on the roster for the last 9 games, with Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre starting the season the way they did, with Draymond Green missing a few games, it's a miracle that they're even in the position that they're in right now. And combine that with the fact that 16-12 is 8th in the West, but if they were in the East, they would be half a game behind the Milwaukee Bucks for the 3rd seed. That's also another thing to keep in mind. And I imagine that once they get Wiseman back, they'll be in much better shape, at least having some size on the court, because their tallest player against the Miami Heat was Andrew Wiggins. Yeah. So Steph Curry currently leads the league in points with 898, which is 85 more than Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's in 2nd place with 813. He leads the league in 3-pointers made with 151, which is 39 more than Damian Lillard, who's in 2nd place. In fact, Steph is so far ahead of everyone else in threes made that the difference between him in 1st and Dame in 2nd is nearly identical to Dame and Jeremy Grant, who is 20th. What he's been doing this season has been unreal to watch. But of course, I can understand if you don't have him as your MVP given the record. So where does that leave us? Well, to be honest, I'm not too sure, because while each candidate does have their own case for winning MVP, it's also 30 games into the season. And usually I don't start legitimately picking MVPs until around the 60 game mark, but since the season is shortened, that might be 50 or 55 games. But with all that being said, who do you guys think has been the MVP so far, and do you think that there's anybody outside of my top 5 that I left out or might have an argument in the future? Let me know what you think. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.